Welcome to The Vinyl Guide, the podcast for record collectors and music nerds. Here's your host, the biggest record nerd of them all, Nate Goyer.
Well, hey everyone, it's Nate. Welcome to episode 514 of The Vinyl Guide. 514, geez. We were just doing 500 just recently. Boy, times do fly, don't they? Yes, episode 514 of The Vinyl Guide, the podcast for record collectors and music nerds. Welcome, everyone. This week on the show, very stoked about this. We have Outlaw Royalty joining us. Shooter Jennings, who is the son of Waylon Jennings and Jesse Coulter. However, he's made quite the name for himself. He's released multiple solo albums. He's producing the likes of Duff McKagan, Marilyn Manson, and more. And Shooter also makes a lot of brave and wild choices with his musical output, vacillating between country and heavy industrial, even dance music. He's not a guy you can categorize. I mean, at all, which is very fascinating. Shooter and I speak about that today. We also talk about growing up with Waylon and Jesse and all the records they had around the house. We talk about how Waylon Jennings discovered a love for Primus. We even hear Shooter recount the tales of Buddy Holly his father shared with him. In case you were unaware, Waylon Jennings was a longtime friend of Buddy Holly. He was even due to be on that plane that took Buddy's life and lived with a lot of guilt for some time. We discuss that today, as well as deep dive into the lost and newly rediscovered tapes and tracks of Waylon Jennings, which is being made available in an upcoming 3-album series titled Songbird. Well, at least the first version is titled Songbird. We'll see what the other ones are titled. But I encourage each of you right now, here's an action item. Go to your streaming services, Apple or Spotify, whatever you listen to. Even Google them up if you want to on YouTube, and search up the Waylon Jennings Songbird album. There's a couple tracks out there. Have a listen. They're beautifully preserved, previously unheard, and lovingly restored by his son. Songbird is a beautiful release, and of course it's on vinyl too. You could check in with your local record shop, have them order you 1 or 3, or you can grab a copy on vinyl for yourself at waylonshop.com. So it's going to be a great show today, and by the way, if you like this podcast and you want to hear more, please follow us in your podcast app. Click the little plus mark and make it a check, or click the follow button if you're in Spotify, and you'll get limitless access to all interviews and feature episodes we have, including episode 512, The Collectible Records of Elvis Presley. That's quite fascinating for Elvis fans and beyond. And then there's episode 506 with talk show host and music nerd Craig Ferguson, Billy Corgan, Billy Gibbons, Fred Schneider, all episode 500. Jerry Cantrell of Alice in Chains, episode 467. Producer of Jimi Hendrix, Led Zeppelin, Kiss, and more, the legend himself, Eddie Kramer, joined us, episode 466, and literally hundreds more. So follow the Vinyl Guide in your podcast app, and you get to enjoy it all. And by the way, real quick, if you like this podcast and you want to keep it going, maybe send your buddy Nate here a beer and a burrito each month. You could always join our Patreon page, patreon.com/vinyl guide. You could sponsor us for $5 or $10 or even more a month if you want. That'd be certainly appreciated. You get all sorts of extras. You get high resolution audio, you get extended episodes and more. And that's how we roll these days. Patreon.com/vinyl guide. That's what keeps the lights on, folks. All right, and with that, let's talk to Shooter Jennings about Waylon, Buddy, Duff, Marilyn, and more. All right, this week on the Vinyl Guide, we are blessed to have on the line Mr. Shooter Jennings, and we're going to talk about a myriad of topics, especially this upcoming Songbird release, which is, correct me if I'm wrong, Shooter, but this is a collection of songs that were incomplete by your dad that you are now taking them over the finish line.
Well, I mean, honestly, most of them were complete. I mean, they had everything, background vocals, his vocals, everything. There were just a couple on this one. You know, there's 3 records that are planned, and some of them that were unfinished in spots. I brought out some of the players that were in the band back then that were on the original recordings and had them just fill in their spaces, because it was mostly the people that were alive who didn't have their parts on some of the things. So it really worked out great. But but yeah, we it was really all kind of finished. He had this whole personal record collection. Bye, David. Happy birthday. The greatest engineer in the world, David Spring, leaving after a long day of work. No, and it was like it was his personal recording collection, and he was just constantly recording all the time and cutting stuff that he was pulling from for records for years. And at one point, the sound changed and things changed, and he stopped pulling from it. But there was just a treasure trove of stuff that was fully complete in it.
Okay. All right. And these were pretty well known to you and the family prior?
No, not really. I mean, we knew that he had all the recordings. Like here's basically the whole story of it. Is that I knew growing up, like that I saw he kept reels of tape in this one room because he at one point he fought a battle with RCA in 1974 and won. And when he did, they allowed him the ability to record on his own. So after that point, he was privately renting studios and doing sessions, and he was keeping the tapes for himself, and he was building records with them as he was going along. So we knew that he had these reels of tape. And in 2008, about 6 years after he passed away, they took all of those reels of tape, and Richie Albright and some of the people in his band pulled some of their reels of tape, and they took it all and had it digitized in 24-bit audio and put it by Iron Mountain and put on drives. And I had those drives for years, and I had kind of dipped into them one time just to look because it was all unlabeled, but it was all in sessions though. So it was like Pro Tools sessions of unlabeled stuff that they had transferred. And so all these years later, I found myself having rented this studio full time with some time, and I took it on with a guy named Nate Hazley, who's an assistant engineer that I use here all the time. And we went in and went through all of it and kind of cataloged everything that was in there. And it was an amazing journey. It was really cool. It was something that was, uh, like a whole other chapter with me and my dad in a way, and the music that was in there, like I got to understand and kind of like unlock why it was all there and why it wasn't released because there was just some amazing stuff. Like Songbird was one of the first things I found, and there was enough to release a lot of stuff, but I picked the best stuff, and I'm making these three projects that are going to kind of come out. And I mixed them myself here in the studio on the 1976 console, totally analog and just like they would have back then. But I feel like I made it sound, really good. And so it's an exciting thing. I'm so super excited for all the people that have kept his name alive all these years to hear this.
Wow. And I got to tell you, as one of the comments I had is it sounds so crisp. I've heard Songbird, of course. Anyone could hear that right now on streaming services. I can pop that up. But I've also heard the Cowboy. Oh my God, it just sounds beautiful. So credit to you and Nate and whoever else is behind those sonics.
Well, thanks, man. It was really an amazing thing to just open up and get to know these sessions really well.
And I'm a picky bastard when it comes to audio, so yeah, that's well done to you guys.
Well, thank you, man. It's all legit. We didn't use any plugins or anything. It was all real outboard gear through the board when we mixed it, so we tried to keep it as authentic as possible.
So these songs, you say you've selected enough for 3 albums. There were more, but you took the ones you think were in best shape. Are all 3 records coming out in October? Or are you starting with one and then going?
No, I'm starting with one, and then the other two will come out over time. I'm not going to kind of promise when, but I'm in. It's all in motion. There's lots of stuff that I found. I mean, there's stuff on my mom that's never been heard that I found, and there's also like a really odd, like the Wailers band of guys, which was this period with Ralph Mooney. It's all like 1974 to like 1984 is kind of the window of most of all of this. And so there's like, it's all Ralph Mooney and Richie Albright, and it was all these other cats in the band, like Barney and Carter Robertson, who came back and played on it, and Jerry Bridges, who came back, and Gordon Payne and Rance Wasson, and all these characters. And they actually they got a record deal, and they were going to release an album, and that record label fell apart before it happened. And like that album is awesome. It's like a Dr. Hook album or something. They all take different songs, and my dad makes appearances on it. And so I want to like mix that. There's kind of a whole universe of music of stuff that I feel like people would really love that I want to also work on. And there's some cool live shows and stuff in there too. So I'm kind of got a big long game plan with all of it to kind of bring it all into the world in different ways, you know.
Wow. Wow. All right. And so I want to make sure, we've got some time here. I want to talk about your projects. I want to talk about some of your background and certainly get into your dad's as well. But this Songbird album really fascinates me because these tapes that have been sitting, were they labeled? Did they have names of the songs on them? Are you finding yourself kind of having to dig even further, even asking some of those studio musicians who played on them what their recollections were of the music?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Yeah, I brought him out here and played all this stuff for them after I'd been working on it and was going to have them help me dress some of it up. And I was counting on their recollections. With Richie Albright gone, he would have remembered everything. So it's like sad that he has just passed away in the last 3 years, and it's like or 4 years or so. And so, like, yeah, there was a lot of hunting for stuff. I had to look at records from all kinds of different places. There was no labels, but later we found segments where people had gone through and labeled some stuff that were like duplicates, but didn't really match up. So we really had to do the work ourselves to make the correct catalog. But I got to tell you, man, it was like, the process was, it got to a point where, um, we're just like Googling lyrics as we hear them and just to make it as fast as possible. And so, like, you're not even recognizing what you're hearing. And so when I got to Songbird and just was like, for you, there'll be no more crying. And like, it's Fleetwood Mac Songbird. And I got chills because that was like his favorite band. And he had covered two songs of theirs that I knew of. And so I was like, oh, no way. And there was just a couple moments like that where it was just like, I can't believe this is in here. There's another couple. I mean, there's some stuff, I'm spreading it out. And it's like they all kind of have different flavors a little bit. And there's some really, really cool stuff in it.
Okay, all right. So the three records are I'll say loosely themed, kind of the songs in
Yeah.
each one kind of connect. Okay, all
Yeah.
right.
They all kind of connect to each other and but they all have kind of a flavor. Yeah.
And I understand you got some recording. Tony Joe White is on some of the recording. Who else are some of the other names that have popped up that people may know?
Well, on this one, I mean, like, it's Ralph. It's really the band. There's not any real crazy guests on it. Tony Joe plays harmonica on one song, and my mom sings on that song too. And it's mainly Richie Albright, Ralph Mooney, Gordon Payne, either Jerry Bridges or Sherman Hayes on bass, and Carter and Barney Robertson, and that's in Rance Wasson. That's kind of the main band, and occasionally there'll be some people coming in and out like that. But there's really no guests or anything on the first record. There's some appearances throughout, and the third one has really the more guests on it. It's kind of part of it, but I won't get into all of that. But
Okay.
the first one is Songbird, so it's kind of the reintroduction.
Okay. And just going through these tapes, I mean, emotionally, that must be a journey for you as well.
Oh yeah.
How was it? How do you prepare yourself for that?
Well, I didn't really think too much about it going into it. I was excited. I thought I was going to find like one thing and a bunch of copies of things that he had finished and we all knew. So I didn't really expect to see kind of his whole body of mess around in the studio work.
Mhm.
But so I couldn't prepare myself, but it was definitely emotional. It was very exciting. Like every day there would be four or five, songs that I'd find on the thing, and I'd come home and tell my wife, like, you're never gonna believe it. We found this and that, and then I'd like send stuff to my brother and Charlie Crockett and I had become really good friends around this time, and still are, of course. But like he around this time he was kind of helping me. I was like sharing what I was working on with him a lot, and then I was like sending it to guys in the band and asking like questions, and I kind of just was doing all this little digging on my own, and then there was like there was people helping too, and so it was kind of it was cool, and I went in there and I found all these stories. Like he told me about like when he did Never Could Toe the Mark, that song was originally a John Lee Hooker cover, and he didn't like the way he sounded doing it, so he wrote another song on top of the music that he had cut for the John Lee Hooker song. And so I went in there when I got to that, I was like, oh, I gotta go find that. And I went in there, and sure enough, like there's vocal takes of him doing the John Lee Hooker song on top of the music that we all know from
Yeah.
Never Could Toe the Mark. So there was like a lot of stuff like that where all the stories were all in there, you know. So there was it was really cool. And it was also really cool to see how much him and the band loved each other, and the general kind of emotional feeling of everything was just joy and having a great time. Like there wasn't anything in there where you would it's just weird. You could tell they loved doing it. They had found a sound, and they loved just playing together, and he loved cutting everything. It was like covers, it was like people's songs that were like obscure songs, or something he wrote or whatever. There was just stuff. He was just cutting all the time.
Mm. Okay. And how many tapes are we talking about? We talk about a dozen, like 2-inch tapes, that sort of thing?
I'm talking about hundreds
Oh,
of two
okay.
inch tapes. Yeah, like hundreds. There was a lot of tapes in there, and 24 to 16 track, mostly 24 tracks. The 16 track stuff is the earlier stuff, which is cool because it's like they only had 16 tracks to work with, so they were like making every track count, and they were like really full sounding and cool. But yeah, it was really neat to have that perspective. Speaking of Tony Joe White, his son kind of went through the same thing. I don't think he went through in the multi tracks and mixed them, but he unearthed like a million Tony Joe White recordings from his, because he had like a home setup. So I've been able to talk to him about the kind of emotional. He's like the only person that's ever done it that I know who really went through and found all this stuff and had this new journey with their dad. So that's a cool thing too.
Wow. Yeah, it kind of reminds me a bit of, the Otis Redding, the posthumous releases from Otis Redding. And
Yep.
in those albums that came out right after he passed, I can only imagine what his wife felt listening to those lyrics. I will love you forever. I'm holding your hand. All those things. It still kind of chokes me up a bit just thinking about what that poor woman went through after that.
Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, it's so funny because like I'd send stuff to my mom of her, and she'd be like, "That's not me." And I'd be like, "Yeah, it is. That is you. Listen, I'm soloing your voice." It was like this awesome song I'd never heard her do in my life, never even heard her sing this way. And it was such a cool thing. And so, yeah, it's funny how everybody reacts to it. My brother Buddy was loving it because he was really helping me. I was like, "Do you remember this song?" And he'd be like, "No, but I know he cut this song." And then I'd like way into it, find that song. I'd be like, "Buddy, I found it." So
Yeah.
it was cool. It was a cool experience, and like it's not over. That's the cool part. I've gone through it all, but there's still stuff that's appearing every once in a while. I'm like, damn, I didn't hear this.
Wow. All right. Well, I definitely want to keep an eye on those additional releases. So, being having the music lineage you have, the son of Waylon Jennings and Jesse Coulter. I guess being a postman or a tax consultant was pretty much out of the question. Was music always kind of that North Star for you?
Yeah, I mean, at a certain point, for sure, it became that, and never changed, which was right around the time I was a teenager. But yeah, like I just from the time I was a little kid, I loved like music made me feel a certain way. I realized like at a very young age, I used to go to a place called Showbiz Pizza in Nashville, Tennessee, and they had these big animatronic robots that would sing songs, and people would have their birthday parties at this place. And I was like 4 years old, and they would do when they would do the birthday, they would sing the Beatles birthday song from the White Album, and I had never heard that. And I remember buying that like a little record of that when I was really little, and just wearing it out on this little Fisher Price you know uh record player that I had. So like I just music always was so exciting to me.
Was there a moment that you realized that your family is a little bit different than a lot of your friends' families?
Yeah, I mean, it was like weird because you don't really realize it until you get into school, and then you kind of realize. But in Nashville, there was like at least like the idea of a musician and stuff wasn't too crazy, but for sure, like it was definitely. I realized it was different. I traveled every summer with my parents until I was like basically a teenager. So like I would leave and go on the road after school, and so. but I would see people out there that had the same lives, like the Nelson family and stuff, like Amy Nelson
Right.
and Paula Nelson are like have been my friends since I was a little baby, and so like but there were, I knew it was different. I knew I couldn't go to the mall with my dad, like without him kind of getting harassed to some degree.
Yeah. Yeah. By the way, I was one of those kids who harassed your dad when he came to a supermarket in Independence, Missouri, and we lined up for autographs for him. So
Oh, I doubt that was harassing, but yes, that's awesome.
that's funny. Yeah, you toured with the Highwaymen. You were the Highway Boy, I guess.
Yeah, I did. I did. We went out, during the first tour when I was really little, and we went to like Germany and all these places on that. And then I really remember we went to Australia for the second Highwaymen, and I was like, I don't know, 13 then or something, and like conscious, and that was really fun. And the Christophersons had like 5 kids, and they were like all beautiful kids. They were all
Yeah.
running around.
So a lot of this podcast is around records and collectibles and rarities and recordings and that sort of thing. And we've had children of other, renowned musicians on. We had John Carter Cash, Tommy Prine. We have multiple Zappa kids. I got to ask you, what was the record collection like in your house growing up?
Oh man. Well, I have to say, one of my just right off you saying that, like one of my favorite albums of all time, like one of my coveted vinyls that I was given to by Tim Hanseroth from Brandy's band is Terry Reid, Seed of Memory, produced by Graham Nash, and he just died. So I have to
Mhm.
say that for me, that is one of the ones that is a coveted album of mine. But so my dad's house growing up, I remember like some specific records, like he, they liked Harry Nilsson a lot, so we had Nilsson Schmilsson in the house, and I remember we had also Son of Schmilsson in the house, and I remember we had their records in the house that I would always like to put on when I was little, and I remember my mom had Hysteria, and I'd never seen what Def Leppard looked like, which I don't know where she got it because it's totally not the type of music she listened to, but I do remember that was there. I remember there was Beatles records there, but then also at one point in the 70s, my dad had bought some guy, or maybe the 80s, bought some guy's entire record collection. And so at his office, there was this hallway room that was just all vinyl. And there was like, when I started to get older, I started looking in there, and there was like the Satanic Majesty's Request by the Stones with the hologram cover and the
Mhm.
sticky fingers with the zipper. Like it was like all that stuff, and we still have that collection. And like there was so he loved all that stuff, but he listened to like at that point he listened to tapes and reels, and so there was all kinds of stuff he listened to at different points in time. He liked Primus at one point. He had Pork Soda on tape.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Any idea who gave him that Primus tape?
Oh, I know that. Well, okay, so he got over the Nine Inch Nails thing once he
Mhm.
realized what was going on, and there was when Woodstock '94 happened. Amy Nelson had invited me to go to. She had somebody that could go to Woodstock '94, and I asked my dad like, "Can I go?" And he was worried because I was like 15 and going up to Woodstock, and who knows what would happen. And he was like, "I'm not going to tell you that you can't go, but I'm going to ask you not to go. And if you don't go, I'll order it on pay-per-view and watch the whole thing with you." And I was like, that's cool, because I didn't really like care that much about actually, going there. It would have been cool, but it did seem like a lot. And so we ordered it, and I watched it and with him, and Primus, when they came on, he just fucking loved it. He thought it was the greatest thing he'd ever heard. So he went out and bought Pork Soda right away. It was pretty awesome. He would latch on to stuff like that and just wear it out.
Wow, that's
Remember that
fascinating.
Lori McKenna? Is that her name? It was in the '90s. She had that whole Appalachian kind of like Irish
Oh yeah.
folk thing.
Hmm.
Lorena McKenna, I think was what her name was, or something. Like he loved that song by her.
Wow. Okay. So his tastes, he was very broad in his acceptance of different music. As a youngling, did you ever bring home a record that made your parents' eyebrow raise?
Yeah, like I shared all the music I listened to with my parents, and my dad and I had a good relationship about that stuff. I remember I played him Nirvana. I wasn't, I really fell in love with Nirvana much later, even though I liked them when they were out at the time. I didn't, it wasn't my favorite band at the time, but I played him that, and he was like, "This sounds like drug music." I remember that was his kind of reaction to that, that he didn't really get Nirvana, but I was into Nine Inch Nails, and I brought home Nine Inch Nails, and that was my favorite band. And like Trent Reznor was kind of the reason I started, was my way into music in a weird way. So like when I brought home, I played in the Downward Spiral. He got a little worried because he was like, well, the lyrical content of it, everything like that. And I was like, man, I was so over the moon over this dude's music. It was like I just couldn't believe what I was hearing, you know. And so he understood that, but I remember he was kind of worried, and I was like, come on, I still love that shit, you know. And I remember my mom wouldn't let me have Marilyn Manson, but my girlfriend bought it for me.
Antichrist Superstar. Yeah.
No, no. I by that time I was 17 and driving around and buying records, but it was the uh, you know, Portrait of an American Family, the first one.
Hmm.
Antichrist is one of my favorite records of all time. Like
Isn't
that's still to this
that
day.
is so brilliant? That is such a great album. That needs a reissue. That's never been reissued on vinyl, as far as I know.
I know. Well, you know, all that there was a while there they weren't going to do that, but I believe they will now, and that's a masterpiece of a record, and I think should be celebrated as such because there's very few records that are that brilliantly put together.
Okay. Were a lot of like different records coming in the house a lot? Like even the record companies or friends bringing over new music for him to try out?
Sometimes, but you know, when they were in the business, they didn't really go to record stores a lot, and
Yeah.
so he would hear things different ways, the radio or whatever, and then go out and buy it. You know, I remember in MTV. You know, I loved MTV, so and he would watch. He liked certain stuff there, but you know, the whole Buddy Holly thing, like he came from that, and I think like ultimately his heart was in this kind of rock and roll music in a way, you know, even though he was a country music was really important to him. I think that like he was very open to music in a different way than most people.
Yeah. Now, he was quite good friends with Buddy Holly. A lot of people know the story of him and the plane wreck, but there were years that he was friends with Buddy Holly. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Buddy kind of took him under his wing and took him to New York for the first time and really confided in him and was uh produced some songs on him and asked him to be in the band when he had a kind of a disagreement with the Crickets and put together a band for that last tour. And then they were going to go on tour in Europe, and my dad was going to like open the shows, and that was kind of the plan. And but yeah, like he was like his best friend for years, you know. And then the thing happened. They knew each other back in town and everything in Lubbock from when my dad was DJing, and he would come and hang around the studio.
Okay. And so that's interesting because so after that winter dance party tour, they had plans to go to Europe. There was I guess there was a whole schedule set up by then already. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Crazy thing. I just went out there again recently, and I had played there a few times, but I went out there just to kind of to bring my brother Buddy, who he'd never been, and he was named after Buddy after that,
Oh.
and all this stuff. So we went out there and went out to where the crash site was and kind of just took it all in, you know, because every time I played there, I've always kind of been on the bus. You know, I wasn't able to kind of like just walk around and do the tour all day and do nothing, you know.
Yeah. What I think part of the story that rarely gets shared is they had to continue the tour after the event. Your dad was actually singing
Buddy
for
songs. Yeah.
yeah.
Crazy, crazy. Can you imagine that? Like that to have just been through that and then kind of have to do that. And then he had to get Buddy's guitar and amp back to his parents, you
Oh,
know.
jeez. So he was haunted by that for quite some time because of the famous, I hope your bus freezes up or the
Yeah.
plane crashes. Did he speak with you about that much?
Oh yeah. I mean, he talked about Buddy almost every damn day, you know. But at the same time, I think he had had some release of it at a different point. You know, he never went back there, and then one time he accidentally got booked there in like 1999, and he didn't realize he was going there until he got there, and it had always been on a list of places he would never go back to. And after that, he said he was able to look at the plane wreckage. He had never been able to look at the picture of the wreckage until after that. So I think he kind of came full circle with it later in life. But the whole thing, yeah, it wrecked him for like 10 years, and then he kind of came back to music. And but I think it definitely psychologically affected him. I mean, imagine the whole thing being called The Day the Music Died and you did it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he carried a heavy weight with him on that. But it sounds like he got some closure from that eventually.
Yeah, he did. He did. I think he came to terms with it at a young age too, that he knew he couldn't change it, but you know, it still haunted him. And I think he felt in a lot of ways that he was on bonus time from that point forward, you know, that he had to kind of live with purpose in a way because, uh, he survived.
Yeah, it could have been him very easily, very easily. Sort of advice did your dad or your parents give you on the music business when it was clear you were kind of making your way in this world? Were they concerned? Because I would imagine that having seen what they saw throughout their career, there probably would have been some justifiable concern about your well-being doing that.
Well, my mom's funny about it. Like, my dad was into it. He liked that I had found my way to music kind of my own way. And, he was very supportive. But he always said, like, don't try and be like anybody else because you're never going to be. Like, it was always the kind of message I got from him. And also, he felt a real responsibility for music. And it was an interesting thing. It was stronger than somebody who's just driven to play music. It was almost he felt like it was responsibility to keep it alive and real, and so he kind of always spoke that way, but not like in a serious way. He was never like, he never. I mean, he just wanted me to be me. He just wanted me to do whatever it was that I wanted to do. He got worried when I was going to move to LA. He was like, you're a big fish in a little pond here, and you go there, you'll be a little fish in a big pond, and but I think once he saw that I had my own drive and a reason for it, he was fine with it. My
Hmm.
mom, on the other hand, she was always like, you we'd be at a show, and there'd be this biker come walking up, this big old guy with a big vest and tattoos all over the place and stuff. She'd be like, "That's your people, son. Are you sure you want to do this?" I'd be like, "Yeah, mom, I want to do it."
Well, that advice your dad gave you, that sounds very appropriate because you strike me just kind of listening to your music and seeing your career from afar. You seem like a real risk taker. You're someone who likes to step outside of the comfort zone. Is that
Yeah,
fair?
for sure, for sure. It's exploratory to me. Everything. It's so I feel like the idea of music is that it's like you're getting to create something, you know, out of nothing, out of silence. And when you hear, like, that's why, like, something like Trent Reznor was moved me so much because I never heard anything like that. Never heard someone take recorded sounds and use them in that way to create this kind of music that was elevated on this crazy level, like that kind of thing, like, just excited me, when I discovered David Bowie and really understood David Bowie. And when I understood, like, Bob Dylan, it was like, oh my God, that just all this stuff that these people did with music is so inspiring, so I like, yeah, I like risk takers, and I like the dissenters, and I like the people that do something different. I'm always drawn to the misfits,
I think that's almost the modern day definition of the outlaw.
Yeah.
But when I see you do something like go from the wolf to black ribbons, which is like a serious turn in the path, a huge creative payoff. But looking back now, how do you know that that's the right idea to pursue?
Man, because I had this feeling like where I was at in my career at that point was like we made the Put the O Back in Country album first, And then we went and made this Electric Rodeo album before the first album came out. So we kind of had it kind of ready to go right out of the gate with Put the Band Country. So we knew the next year we could put out another record. So all during that process between those and what would become the third album, The Wolf, like so much happened. Like we toured. At one point, the label changed hands, and see, Tony Brown and Tim Dubois were the people that signed us at Universal, and they were completely hands off with us. They let us do exactly what we wanted to do in the studio and put it out on a major label. We were really lucky, and they were real true artists, and they would say, "You guys are crazy." But they would let us do it, and it changed. And not that they weren't letting us do what we wanted, but the new people had a new system, and we we weren't really given the go like we were,
Mm-hmm.
and I was kind of given the option to stay or spend less money making records. I was actually told you should start rehearsing the stuff on the road before you go in the studio, and I opted out. And so at that point, the Wolf had a really kind of lackluster launch, and we just my band was kind of splitting up. Me and Leroy Powell had parted ways, and there was just kind of all this stuff going on. So I remember just feeling kind of exhausted by the music business and the idea of like going and cutting a record that was like me selling myself with a new set of songs to kind of follow up what we didn't really do right with the Wolf. It just bored me to tears, the idea of it. And I remember I just had this moment where I listened to Art Bell all the time. He was like my favorite dude, and I was doing a road trip listening to him every night. And I heard this episode with this dude, David Icke, on it, talking about all these invisible reptiles and all this stuff. And I was like, this interests me. Like, I was like, this is really interesting. And then at the same time, I had this like Blue Oyster Cult CD that was like a greatest hits, and that song Astronomy was on it from their Secret Treaties album. And I was like listening to that song over and over and over and going, I'm just gonna do. I kind of just felt like I had played the game a little with the Wolf. Yeah, I'm not saying I compromised anything musically, but just the behavior of what we were doing, because we had kind of gotten excommunicated for something that we did with Electric Rodeo from radio, and so I was just like trying to peacefully put out like what I thought was really a country record, and but still I had these tendencies of wanting to get weird. And then like when this happened and I felt kind of broken down and beat up by the situation, I just said, you know what, I'm going to do something that I can do that's weird, and just going to go for it. And I just had this idea, just kind of went and saw it through. I was just determined to see it through.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how that happened. Sorry for the long
No,
roundabout.
it's fascinating because I see it, and this is my reading of it. You could have stayed and played it quite safe and had a level of success and the expectations and everything. But these albums, even the Giorgio Moroder one, you seem to be a guy who is almost like at a roulette table, putting everything on one number, winning, then putting all that on another number. I mean, just placing these big bets that have these phenomenal payoffs, but it's so risky and interesting. I don't think many people are doing the sort of creative approach that you have.
Well, thanks. That's a really nice way of putting that I have a very who knows the output, but I appreciate that. I mean, that's when I started to really, really go like I want to produce records, because it was like, now at this point I'm experimenting with sounds with me as the artist in all these different directions, but like I started to realize like where 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 the thing that excites me is in the studio. It's in all the creation of all this stuff, and that it doesn't have to be me for me to feel like fulfilled. It's like I love working with other people and doing things with them when we're in this kind of like trust relationship. So I
Mm-hmm.
started to realize like once I was doing those Giorgio records and stuff, like, I want to do more. And by that time I had started really working with other people.
Yeah, I would imagine you select projects just based on your ability to kind of stretch yourself, like the Duff McKagan, going from Duff to then Marilyn Manson. That especially that album that Duff made. Again, outside the comfort zone, it must be.
Yeah, it's but in a way, these were all things that I like. I mean, Guns N' Roses was a huge influence for me as a young kid. Like I loved that band, and I loved those Use Your Illusion records, and I met Duff and those guys at a young age when I was out here. Kind of, I did a couple gigs with them, but then didn't see him for years. And someone else brought that record up to me, and Duff didn't consider me really. He didn't even know I was really producing records. We hadn't seen each other in a long time, but I this guy put my hat in the ring with his manager, and then we got together, and that was the time when I was really trying to build my way into it a bit, and so I got lucky that I got these projects that were really made a lot of sense to me as a person if you knew me, but maybe
Mhm.
to the outside world didn't. But like Manson was like a dream come true. Like that was, we had become friends in 2013, and 5 years later he asked me to do his record, and I was like just over the moon, but terrified at the same time, and he was like, there was no songs, so we were just gonna write them all together, and I was like, oh my gosh, like I hope I don't fuck this up, for my 17-year-old self. But and that was an incredible record to be a part of. I'm that's probably one of the highlights of my musical life, if not the one, from being in the studio, just because of how creative and cool it was.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would imagine he would give you free reign to just to try all sorts of things.
Yeah, yeah, totally, and really, like really encouraging, like to like I'm not a great guitar player, and he was encouraging me to like, no, you're gonna play the solo, and I'm like, no, man, come on, like, and he's like, dude, you're gonna do it, come on, and then I'd end up doing something he'd like it, and he was really good about taking an idea that I had for like a song musically, and then kind of make like instantly referencing all these other records that he loves by people through time, like things that remind him of it. And he'll play me all this stuff. And then we'll kind of like bend our thing towards that a little bit, or
Mm.
kind of like that. And then he would write lyrics, and he would write these lyrics to the songs and craft them. And, it was really cool.
Yeah. Well, again, it goes in a long line of projects you have that, again, seem to stretch the boundary. The Yellow Wolf album.
Oh man, that was one I'm really proud of, because that was like we were in this room right here 10 days, and made up all that music out of nowhere for the most part, and then he went back and wrote lyrics on it and came back, and it was done. But it was like that was such a creative, like the idea was just to go for it and go for the stuff that we liked from when we were kids, and the kind of movie soundtracks and stuff we liked, and all
Mhm.
that. So like we had like a 2 hour conversation about like getting to the his one of his biggest favorite soundtracks was when he was a kid, was that movie Legend that Tangerine Dream did the soundtrack for.
Mhm.
And like so we were like thinking of that a bunch, and brought like synthesizers from that time, and which is like my favorite stuff too. So
Yeah.
it was a delight to make that record.
I try to, that's the one, that's the entry point that I recommend people on, because every song is so different, but it gives you kind of that feel for the different type of tones and timbres and songwriting approaches that you have in some of your other works. Um, the the one that I wanted to bring up was the Phoenix on.
Oh yeah,
You
man.
now I know your father was supportive of you creatively, but getting him involved in a project like that, and again, it's probably quite foreign to where he spent a lot of his musical life. That's got to be an interesting series of conversations. Yeah.
Man, it was like look, he was supportive that I was into recording, and like had bought everything we needed for like a little home studio. And the idea was that I was going to help him record demos, and then I would use it too, but then I ended up just using it all the time. And I would do stuff with him, but I was in there all the time. And but at one point it was like we should do an album together, and I'm like about 16 or 17, and I'm into Nine Inch Nails, and I'm into Marilyn Manson, I'm into Ministry, and I'm into like Danzig, and I'm into all this stuff. So I had this idea to kind of like cook up his songs in this style of music that I was listening to, And then I wrote a couple songs, and then he wrote one that it was kind of like his version of an avant-garde song, like I like, because he was trying to write something like this style, which was that "I Found the Body" song. He wrote all the lyrics to it, and like so, it was like this thing we did together. And then we went in the studio. So I made all the music, and I made up the outlaw shit thing. Like the funny thing about that song is like I was thinking about Hurt
Mm.
and because I am trying to make this song Outlaw Bid into like a Hurt type song, which was so funny later when Cash did Hurt. I was like, no way, because I knew in my head I remembered this moment. But that was amazing. And we went into the studio and he cut vocals. I remember I was in high school. I came to the studio after school and he was there and he'd been doing some guitar and vocals and we did this whole thing and we were going to put it out and we tried to send it to John Malm who ran Nothing Records with Trent Reznor to sign and they didn't sign it, but Manson remembers when he got it and he like played it for them because they were like, this is so weird, you know. And also that outlaw, I don't know how I can say it, but outlaw shit thing, I've been cussing the whole time I guess, but that song they were considering it for the Romeo and Juliet soundtrack with Claire Danes and Leonardo DiCaprio, but it didn't happen. So I was like 17 when that happened, and then it never came out. And then years later, we did that Waylon Jennings and the 357s by taking those vocals and doing it with my band then. And then I finally re-released the actual Phoenix On project later.
That is just heavy as balls, man.
Well, it's like 16-year-old me messing around in my home studio.
Your first credit, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, 1979, A Man Called Hoss. You wrote, at 8 years old, wrote a track or wrote part of Nashville. Is that right?
Well, I was born in '79, but I think A Man Called
Or
Us was a
87,
little.
87. Yeah, sorry,
Yeah,
87.
87. Yeah, yeah. I think so. I always I've been meaning to ask my mom this, what it is. I think there's a line in it that I said or something, and he gave me a credit on that song. And I just the other day this came up, and I meant to write her and ask her what is the story on that because I don't remember.
Okay.
I don't know if I like said a line or something, and he wrote it into the song, and he gave me writer credit on it or something, or I don't know.
Right. Okay. Yeah, your first co-write.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess so.
Oh, that's beautiful. So you're coming around full circle here. This Songbird album. Now, with these recordings, you've got the first single out, Songbird. There's going to be a few more available coming out between now and October 3rd when everyone will get the record.
There's one more about to come out, which is the Cowboy, and that's the only other thing until the album comes out. But there'll be we're kind of in the last month leading up to it, so now we're kind of in that place where we're really trying to reach some folks that aren't on the internet and doing some stuff and
Hmm.
some advertising in some rural areas. And we've had a lot of beautiful people helping us in some great areas, like Billy Bob's putting a big Waylon Jennings Still the King thing up, and all these folks. It's really been beautiful, this whole process, man. It's like you can tell how much people love Waylon, that they're all coming together to help spread the word about this stuff, you
Oh
know?
yeah, yeah. And I love how authentic it. Like you'll hear the songs. They don't have proper fade outs or anything. They kind of
Yeah.
just conclude because again, they were never finished in the day.
Yeah, like well, I just loved it. There's one where Richie, the drummer, just falls out cracking up at the end of the song, and I loved that. I was like, I'm leaving that. Like, why would I fade that? You know, it's like that people will love that, and so I kind of kept it wide open at the end of all of them.
You hear the chatter and stuff, and so yeah. So I'm going to put some links up. I believe there's a special Tiger's Eye vinyl available that people can get from Civilians, but I'll put those links in this episode page. Let me ask you, Shooter, what role does vinyl play in your life these days?
Man, it's a huge part of my life. I mean, it's taken. I ran a label for a long time and still do, but we for years took part in Record Store Day, 4 releases sometimes every year, and so we got to know a lot of these record stores and the great people at them. So vinyl is a huge part as far as like I love the process of making vinyls for people and doing little things, hiding things in them. And then also like listening to vinyls is a huge part of my life. Always has been. We're very much off the grid type. We have VHS cassettes and laser discs and CDs. I love CDs still, and so we kind of have all that. But vinyl, there's nothing like just putting a vinyl on. And like I have a couple go to when I've had a little too much to drink. My wife will know. They always know because I put on like the same. I basically just put on uh, "Still Crazy After All These Years" or "Tempest" by Bob Dylan. Kind of are the two. Maybe the night we called it a day. That album, "Shadows in the Night" or whatever. I think that one will go on, and it's time for me to go to sleep.
Do you got a favorite record shop?
Yeah, Amoeba. I go to Amoeba. It's like 5 minutes from my house, and I'm there all the time. And I love the people there. And my daughter goes there all the time. My son loves it. So that's a big part of our lives.
Shooter, thanks again, mate. And, again, we hope to talk to you soon. And everyone, check out this new Waylon Jennings issue, Songbird, out October 3rd. You could listen to a track or two right now on all streaming services and prepare yourself to download the full album on the day of release. Shooter, thanks again, mate. Be well.
Thank you, man. Take care.
Cheers. Oh, what a cool dude. I mean, literally, you got to get that Waylon Songbird going. It really does sound beautiful. It's on streaming now. Look it up. Set yourself up to listen to a couple of the tracks, and you get the album on the day it comes out. And also check out Shooter Jennings' solo stuff. Personally, if you're new to Shooter's work, start with the album Sometimes Why with Yellow Wolf. That'll give you a bit of a taste on what the rest of the catalog is. But of course, jump around. There's a lot of really interesting stuff in the catalog of Shooter Jennings, and we look forward to seeing what he's got up his sleeve next. And that's it for this episode of The Vinyl Guide. Thank you so much for tuning in. Again, super thanks to everyone who's helping sponsor the show on patreon.com/Vinyl Guide. That is hugely appreciated. Everyone who's leaving us positive reviews on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, putting us on Reddit forums and Facebook groups and sharing it on social media. That is hugely appreciated as well. And we'll be back shortly with a brand new episode. So until we talk next time, you all behave yourselves. And thanks again for listening to the Vinyl Guide podcast. Cheers.